Hi. Now, we realise this video, it's about nothing that exists currently. This has not been announced. It's completely hearsay. But it's just, we were watching the Deadpool test footage. And we loved that. It's fantastic. And as they've released that footage, and they've said that they're going to do a movie. 2016 release. Really looking forward to that. And we're thinking, what about other movies that have not been announced yet, but that could be made? Given that there are so many successful properties out there that could be made into a movie. Now, we know that this particular idea, we are proposing a movie based on a video game, which they're basically, for the most part, they're shit. We're not blind to this. And it could completely tank, but if they were going to make a movie about a video game, it's one that we personally think could be a pretty clever idea for a one-shot property. A one-shot sort of feature. Borderlands the Movie. Now, people might not think that's a very good idea, but we had a few casting ideas, and we wanted to run them by you guys to see what you think. Now, like we said, we were watching that freaking Deadpool test footage, and we thought, main antagonist, Handsome Jack. Is that, if you listen to him in the game, and you listen to the Deadpool test footage, do you not just get that feeling that Ryan Reynolds is Handsome Jack? Always giving you these smart, fucking quips on the radio, taking the piss out of you at all times while plotting your death. So arrogant and above it all, and he's sitting there on his mountain of money. Apparently he's really rich. The whole diamond pony thing. And we think Ryan Reynolds could pull that off so well. That arrogant asshole kind of character who you just want to kill. Not to say anything against Ryan Reynolds. He can be funny. Green Lantern movie notwithstanding. Because that was a pile of shit. But then again, that's sort of the thing that does not need to be said. But could you not see Ryan Reynolds as Handsome Jack? It could just be us, but that doesn't seem like a completely terrible idea. So that's our pick for him. Now, Axton the Commando, we're going from Borderlands 2 character roster. You could add the other ones if you wanted to. We'd have to give those characters a bit more thought before we gave out our possible candidates for the performances. But Axton the Commando, maybe we're just riding the coattails of Dread 3D, but we see Carl Urban in that role. He's gruff, he's got that sort of serious demeanour, and he's at home in an action movie. For instance, Dread 3D is probably one of our favourite movies of that year. In particular, we got it on DVD. It was great. It was an action movie. It didn't try and be more than it was, and what's more, Carl Urban portrayed Dredd as he was in the comic books. Completely serious to a fault. No bullshit, no nonsense. Complete stickler for the rules. And he never took the damn helmet off. Which is one thing that god-awful Stallone movie screwed up epically. But we think Urban would do really well in that role. We think that could be a real thing for him. Now, moving on to Maya, the siren. Sorry, not commando. She's a siren. We're thinking maybe Lena Headey. She can act. She was really good in Game of Thrones. We've been told. We've never actually seen Game of Thrones. Yes, we call ourselves a nerd, but we've never seen Game of Thrones. We started to watch the first episodes, and we were kind of like, what's this crap? We'll probably give it another watch because everyone says it's really good, really well acted, and there are some nice locations, sets, and characters in it. It's got some good drama in it as well, not just the epic sort of fantasy aspects. It's all authentic. All the sets look authentic. They look great, and the costuming and the characters, they're all pulled off without a hitch that we could see. Specifically, Sean Bean. In that first few episodes we saw, he was beyond reproach. We couldn't find a fault with him. Yeah, it was a bit freaking psychotic making his own son watch a beheading, but we're not saying that's what we would do for our boy. But when you're a king, we guess you got to sort of like get your kids in the family business pretty early. So, like we said, maybe Lena Headey. She also did pretty good in an action role in the Terminator TV series. Yes, it wasn't a very good series. It was basically aping the entire Terminator franchise, but some of the action scenes were passable, and she did a pretty good job in that when she was, doing all the gunplay and the fighting and stuff like that. She wasn't that bad. The rest of the show was crap. What a cute, petite, 17-year-old female Terminator. Good God. It's like Skynet has decided to cater to the friggin' paedophiles of the world. Moving on to Salvador. Now, this is not a racist accusation. This is not like a racist statement. We just see in that role Danny Trejo. Sorry, we know he's not like the same size as Salvador, because Salvador's quite short and dumpy. But how many truly badass Hispanic actors who can match that sort of gruff, that sort of really tough bastard image are there out there? There aren't that many. In fact, Danny Trejo is the only idea we could come up with. He could be wearing a giant banana costume and Danny Trejo would still present the image of "do not fuck with me." That's what he would do. And we think that he could be good in that role. And if Danny Trejo is in a movie with guns, he's got to have 2 fucking guns. He's that awesome. He's a badass. And that's what Salvador is. He's a freaking gunzerker. That's his class. He goes in, head first, just guns blazing, and just wipes every fucker out. That's who you need as Salvador. He's great. Now, moving on to Zero. It's kind of tricky to cast that guy, as you never see his face. He's constantly covered with the helmet and the suit. In fact, you never see a single part of his actual body. So we were thinking someone with a good voice, someone who's only done a voiceover part in other movies, or someone who is, authoritative when they're speaking, things like that. And we had a couple of ideas for this. One was, what was he called? Shit, we should know this. What's that name? Hugo Weaving. He did well in V for Vendetta. That sort of assassin. We enjoyed V for Vendetta, actually. It's one of our top sort of like obscure comic book movies. And we think he might do well as Zero the Assassin. You know, another possibility is maybe to voice him, Paul Bettany. He did rather well as Jarvis in Iron Man. We're not exactly sure how he would do with a more active role, but he has done action roles before. Crappy scripts and shitty direction, but he's done Legion for one, and he's done Priest for two, and those were heavy action movies. So he's comfortable among the traditional things like the guns, the knives, things like that. So perhaps he's a consideration. You know, at least you could do is consider him for the role because he's got a voice. Because Zero's voice isn't all. It's not James Earl Jones in Darth Vader. Darth Vader was fierce. He was imposing. But his voice conveyed that as well. Not just his appearance, the helmet and the cape and the black and the robot suit bullshit, but when James Earl Jones voiced Darth Vader in the original trilogy, you could just feel the authority coming off him when he spoke. The guy was not taking shit from anyone, and we think Jones pulled that off. But Zero, he's not exactly the same kind of guy. He does wear the robot sort of suit, you know, a bit like that Alcatraz from the Crysis games. But if you listen to his audio logs in the game, he doesn't have that booming authoritative voice. He's sort of like a quiet confidence. You know, he's very evenly spoken, but he's very intelligent at the same time. And you want someone who's going to, you know, portray that with their voice. So perhaps Hugo Weaving, perhaps Paul Bettany. Here's another one, a good one for you. Maybe Peter Dinklage. Also Game of Thrones. You know, he was in Game of Thrones. You know, he was a major character. He was okay in Days of Future Past. We thought his character was really good in that, Bolivar Trask. Of course, he couldn't be in the suit because Zero's very tall and thin, whereas Peter Dinklage is unfortunately quite small. But we think he could do a really good job as the voice. You know, he's slicing through people and making up haiku of it. It just seems like it would be a brilliant choice for the voice of him. Well, for instance, James Earl Jones was never in the Darth Vader costume. That was David Prowse. You know, James Earl Jones never appeared in the Star Trek movies that we're aware of. Maybe it's probably some bloody cameo of him, like all the way over in the background in one of the crowd scenes or some shit, you know. But he doesn't need to be seen, only needs to be heard. That's where the character comes from, the voice. Because Zero is not there's not a lot about him that's terribly interesting. He's basically your cyborg ninja guy. And we've seen that in Metal Gear, we've seen that in Crysis, we've seen that in numerous other things. He's basically your ninja character with a more technologically advanced suit. So, 3 possibilities: Paul Bettany, Hugo Weaving, Peter Dinklage. That's a pretty decent selection for the top 3 there. Let us know if you've got any counterpoints. Anybody else you think. And Tiny Tina. We gotta have a Tiny Tina in this movie because she was hilarious in the game. We just wish we could just play those missions over and over again because Tiny Tina was basically the funniest thing about that game. We're not sure of her name, but she's young enough and she's proven to be quite funny, and she can talk like a badass if she wants. The girl who played Hit Girl from Kick-Ass and Kick-Ass 2. She played Hit Girl and she was funny and she was a badass in that, so she knows action, she knows comedy, and she could pull them off quite well for a younger actress. We just see Tiny Tina when we look at her, with her stupid nursery rhymes and blowing people up. And that's as far as we've really got on the characters for the movie. It's not been slated to actually happen that we know of. They're not making this movie that we know of. But if they did, there are just a few ideas that we wouldn't mind putting out there. Let us know if you've got any counterpoints, any other suggestions, and ta-ta for now.